Hello guys and girls, how's it going? Screezilla here. And I hope you're all well. And today we are going to be looking at the history of the Vickers MBT, the Vickers main battle tank. Now, Vickers Armstrong, a British company who made many vehicles, including the Vickers Valiant, guns, planes, cars, everything, tanks, developed the Vickers MBT as a replacement to the Centurion originally. However, it didn't really work out too well. So they ended up using the Vickers MBT as an export tank. And, well, basically it was designed to be a simple, low-cost, but very effective vehicle. It wasn't really taken up by many people, other than the Indian Army, mainly. There were a few MBTs delivered to Kenya, Nigeria, Tanzania. Also, Kuwait actually had around about 70 Vickers MBTs in operation, and they were operated during the Kuwaiti War. There was some operation there. But they weren't that great. They didn't do too well. The main vehicle and main use of this tank was India, with the Vijayanta. Sorry, I'm very bad at Indian. Now, the development of the Vickers MBT was a private venture for the Vickers Armstrong factory. They decided to build a model solely for export in the end, and developed the Mark 1, a 24-ton, 20-pound gunned tank. Later, the main gun was swapped for the new and far more effective L7 105mm gun, as this development coincided with the agreement with India in 1961 for a light tank design. Vickers Armstrong also agreed to build a factory in India for this tank to be built under license there by the Indian Army, and also to replace their slightly aging Centurion tanks as well, giving it equal firepower but with a slightly more advanced tank, basically. The tank was sold to India, and it was named Vijayanta, or Victorious. The first tank rolled out of the Indian line in 1964 and entered service in 1965. It actually entered service when war broke out with where am I? With Eastern Pakistan, but we'll get to that later. Now, the design of the Vijayanta, Vickers MBT, was largely based on the Mark 1, as I say, this what we're using right now. It had welded rolled homogeneous armour plates and weighed roughly about 38 short tons. It was more or less equivalent to the Soviet-built T-54 and T-55s at the time. But this didn't make it a light tank. The armour was seriously reduced compared to the Centurion, with only 80mm on the turret and front glacis plates. Still, this was good enough against the conventional World War II era tanks or early Cold War models that Pakistan were using. Pakistan were actually using generally the M47, M48 patterns at the time, equipped with the 90mm guns. Furthermore, the L7 gave this tank the necessary reach to kill the enemy before they could get into their firing range. So basically, the MBT was I thought, goddamn scummy revenge killing planes. A typical RU-251 player there, dies, jumps in a plane, comes and tries to revenge kill you. Oh, I hate planes so much in ground forces. I wish I had to take off from the airfield. Anyway, losing track. So basically the L7 gave this tank enormous reach, allowing it to take out the enemy before they could even get close to them. The M47 Patterns were not able to match the gunnery range of this of the L7 at the time. The drivetrain had 6 road wheels. They were not grouped into bogies, but evenly spread and narrowly placed from each other, with independent torsion bar suspension. The turret was similar design to that of the Centurion, but much smaller, with a commander cupola with 8 bulletproof glass vision blocks to the right, and a simple 2-piece hatch for the gunner to the left. It had quite a few storage boxes as well, which made the tank quite popular. It did do very well. The armament, as I say, was the L7. It did later actually receive the L7A2 main gun with an upgrade. But interestingly for this tank, it actually has 2 coaxial guns in the turret. I'll just switch to the 3 camera here and we'll hit O. And what you can see there is we have a 7.62mm gun just to the right of the main gun, and then we have a 50 cal. So this tank has a 50 cal and a 7.62mm gun in it, which really does help. The 12.7mm heavy machine gun had 2,000 rounds in storage, and there was also the secondary 7.7mm gun placed coaxially as well, with 500 rounds. There was an option of an additional 7.7mm to be placed on the roof to act as an anti-aircraft gun. Now the Mark 1 evolved into the Mark 2, which was just a slightly upgraded version, slightly better engine, things like that. But there were a few additional versions. The Mark 2 had sort of better gun sights. It had a laser rangefinder, things like that. There was actually variants designed with ERA on them for later use. There was an ERA variant designed by the Indian Army. Now, you have to bear in mind, this tank is still technically in active service in the Indian Army. Well, the Mark II is anyway. The Mark I was phased out. This thing has gone on for a long time in the Indian Army. They are phasing it out, but yeah, as I say, it is still very much in storage and in use. As I say, there was the ERA variant. There was also a variant with the T-55's engine and the T-55A's fire control system. Sorry, T-72's engine. Sorry, not T-55's. So yeah, they used the V84 engine from the T-72 and fitted it into this tank. So this tank had some very interesting upgrades in the end. It ended up with some Russian bits in it, and oh god, just typical Indian Army. They really find a way to make their tanks last over there. As I said, the tank did see action. It's seen a little bit of action in a few wars, not too many, but mainly the main action it saw was in 1960. Sorry, where am I? It did see service in the 1965 war, just very briefly. However, the main service came in 1971 when the Bangladesh Liberation War happened. And that was over the issue of the Kashmir over issue of the Kashmir. Indian armoured divisions, now largely equipped with the Vijayanta, intervened to support the Bangladesh liberation movement and saw intense fighting until the surrender of East Pakistan forces. They actually used a blitzkrieg technique with these tanks because they were very light, they were very speedy, and they were a bit faster and better. They could maneuver better than the tanks in use at the time, which were generally the Patterns and the T-54s, T-55s. they just had much better movement. Also, this tank had a very good rate of fire too. You see here, just taking out those those two T-54s there in quick succession. This tank has got a very good reload rate, and it did have that in the real world as well. Along with that L7 gun, which gave this tank a very good range, very accurate gun firing handling as well. All in all, the tank was considered a bit of a flop for the English market, but as I say, it was very, very good for the interesting bomb there. It was very good for the export market. Now, there were some other prototypes and designs. There was a Vickers Mbt Mach 2 version, and it was going to be equipped with 4 swing-fire anti-tank missiles, in addition to the main gun. But it didn't end up getting into production. But that would have been a very interesting tank, and it is something that could possibly come into the game as a premium. There was a Mark IV variant, which was designed to replace the Challenger. It had a smoothbore Rheinmetall 120mm L44 gun. It was a very interesting tank, but it didn't really make it. Only prototypes again were made. There is a Mark VII in production, again with Choban armor. Again, this is something that we may see in-game. The Vickers Mbt Mach 7 was a very interesting tank. There was also an anti-tank variant as well, equipped with the marksman turret. And it had... Where am I? And it was equipped with 155mm guns. Basically, it's the Gepard system. So it was pretty much a Gepard with... It should be 37mm. Sorry, 35mm guns. Where am I? Oh, sorry, I was reading the wrong section there. No, sorry, no, it wasn't equipped with 150mm guns, 55mm guns. No, it was the Gepard, so 30, whatever it is, 35mm Acrylians, I think. So again, that's something we could see in the British line, and that could be a really good AAA vehicle because, as we know, the Gepard is very good and it gets radar. It would be a good upgrade over the Falcon. And that would be on the Vickers MBT chassis. Again, it was a prototype. I think there was a couple made, but they weren't really put into much action. There were a few Vickers AAA tanks out there, but yeah, as I say, the Vickers Mbt AAA, it was more in testing, things like that. It's quite an odd-looking vehicle because the marksman turret on top of the MBT chassis does look a bit goofy because it's very large. I mean, the Gepard is actually based on the Leopard chassis, but the Leopard chassis is slightly bigger and just a little bit... It doesn't look quite as goofy. I'd suggest having a look up of this tank if you get a chance. There was also 155mm howitzer versions. That's where I was getting my facts wrong. Sorry about that. And these were, you know, just artillery vehicles. But again, they weren't overly used. The chassis did work really well, and one of the main advantages of the Vickers MBT over the Centurion was the fact that it was much lower. It had a much lower profile. Once we lose this match, as you can see, we're losing here quite badly. I've managed to hold A pretty well in this game, but unfortunately not enough. All in all, pretty good game. 5 kills. Not going to complain at that with the MBT. But when we get back to the hangar in a second, we will see the difference is. So let's just quit this replay. That's the end of the match. Now the tank had the Leyland L60 multi-fuel engine as well, and same fire control system as the Chieftain too. It was a very good tank, as I said. So if we look here, we can see the MBT has a very low profile. If we switch to the Centurion here, it's much lower. There we go. It's much lower profile. The cupola, you can see it's not a raised cupola. It has raised periscopes instead of a cupola, which allowed the commander to sit in relative safety down here a little bit lower. It also allowed the commander not to have to sit up as much, but it did mean that when they were using the anti-aircraft gun, the commander had to sort of just open the hatch and hope for the best. It was a little bit trickier to use. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about this tank in game. So you do get the 50 cal, the 12.7mm heavy machine gun, which is the L21A1 machine gun, which I think is a British variant of the Browning, if I remember correctly. I'm probably wrong on that one, and somebody will correct me in the comments. But we also get the 7.62mm machine gun as well, which is absolutely pathetic and useless. Now, the gun doesn't actually have great penetration. If we look at the rounds, we only get 7mm of penetration with that 12.7mm machine gun, so it is a bit disappointing in that sort of respect. It's not as good as the American. However, it is incendiary rounds, so if you do hit a plane, you generally will set it on fire, so that is something. You will be able to take out exposed crew with it, but you're not going to be able to take out light vehicles with it, unfortunately. The main thing on this tank is a reload, and the reload rate, you can get down to almost 5 seconds on this tank, and it is ridiculous. You know, if you've got the full maxed out crew, things like that, it's just so good. If we compare it to the Centurion Mark III, which has 7.5, 5.8 second reload is just mega. The Centurion Mark X, again, has a very long reload rate, 8.7 stock, and that reload rate makes the Vickers MBT deadly, because you can fire off rounds very quickly, as you saw in that video with the T-54s. In any other tank, I probably would have been dead there. Even though my loader was down, I still had that reload rate to take out that secondary tank before he could even get stationary. The tank also has a stabilizer as well, which means your gun is not going to swing around, which is also a big benefit, a very good benefit of this tank. One of the biggest weaknesses, though, is the armor, and as you saw in that video, I was getting taken out by the 262 with the guns, and although it had the cannons on board, and that will rip through most tanks, it's able to penetrate the side armor of this thing. This thing has no armor. It is a glass cannon. You will stop, you know, heavy machine gun rounds. You will stop a few AAA rounds as well. But if they get you from the side, properly from the side, you are absolutely ruined. Your turret, not going to save you either. You do have okay frontal armor. With that sloping, you do get a couple of ounces here and there, but it's not really going to protect you from anything at close ranges. The turret, again, is very disappointing. You can't really rely on it for going hull down. That's where the Centurion absolutely kicks this thing's butt. The turret on the Centurion is just impenetrable when it's hull down, whereas the Vickers is very easy to go through for most tanks at this BR. So you have to play this tank in a sort of sneaky role. You have to play it relatively quietly. Now, you have got a 4-man crew, as I say, which does help out things. Also, you do have quite a good ammo range as well. You've got the standard shots, as you would expect, the L28A1 round, the APDS round, which is just absolutely fantastic, and you will get some very good penetrating shots, and you also get Hesh, of course, which is, yeah, hopefully they'll unnerf Hesh again, because Hesh used to be good. As you can see, I've not aced out this tank yet. I've still got a lot to go on it, but all in all, it is a very good little vehicle. The main thing, as I said, is that fire rate. Also, the low profile really does help. You can actually absolutely do ridge lines. There is good depression on the gun as well. So working at ridgeline again, you've got very good depression on the gun, which really does help. So I will end it there, I think. I do hope you've enjoyed this video. Please give us a like, a comment and subscribe if you did. Sorry about lots of ums and pauses and stammers in this video. It's if you've seen some of my other videos, you'll know I'm just a little bit unwell at the moment. So I do apologise about that, but I do hope you found this video good and interesting, and I will see you again soon. Thank you so much for watching, and this is Screezilla out. Bye bye.